So let's get started right away. I'm starting with an introduction to i.t.a. for the remediation of reading disabilities, dyslexia. You notice that's a slash. And the reason I'm going to talk about reading disabilities, dyslexia, is to dispel the notion that somehow dyslexia is different from a reading disability. It is not. Dyslexia is simply the medical term for a specific reading disability. So many of the kids that you are working with, or young adults, could be also diagnosed as having dyslexia. But in schools, we usually call them reading disabilities, okay? So I want to start with why children fail in reading, why the adults that Gregory's working with failed way back in the early elementary level. So in our written language, we have 44 sounds, but we only have 26 letters. So there's confusion right there that letters have to stand for different ones. We have very complex spelling patterns. There's well over 200 different spelling patterns that kids need to master. And we have imported a lot of words from other languages. English is the largest language in the world. We have somewhere between 600,000 to 1 million words in our language. Most other languages have 250,000 words. So English is by far the most difficult language to learn to read. And we have the highest incidence of dyslexia or reading disabilities. I'm going to tell you also about why kids fail to learn by telling you my story of Peter, whom I did not teach correctly years ago because I didn't know about i.t.a. at that time. First of all, this is a poem that I found where you can see when the English tongue we speak, why is break not rhymed with freak? Will you tell me why it's true we say so, but likewise few? There are some of the confusions that very early readers meet right away if we're using what we call TO, or traditional orthography. With the initial teaching alphabet, though, you don't have that confusion because there are 44 sounds spoken English, so there are 44 symbols. And you can see written in i.t.a. now the puzzle fits. You see that some of those words are exactly the same, about 1/3 of them. Some of them are only slightly different, and then there are these weird symbols. They're not really weird. Notice here, I will be referring to TO, which means traditional orthography or traditional spelling. And notice the difference between break in traditional and break in i.t.a. On the other hand, freak, which looks the same in traditional orthography, looks very different in i.t.a. So we have a very phonetic alphabet that will help kids to crack the code. A little later on, I'm going to be telling you about research that's been done in England and Italy and Germany that shows that, in fact, i.t.a. helps beginning readers to crack the code and become good readers much faster than traditional orthography in English. So let me tell you about Peter. Peter was a child that I started on a very phonetic program. It's called Reading Mastery or DISTAR. It's kind of become popular again. This was a good 35, 40 years ago, probably. And Peter learned that the sound let me get my felt tip pen so that I can show you exactly what this was with Peter. So Peter learned that this was It took many lessons, but he learned that to see that and say Then he learned and he said and then he learned t, and he said t, okay? So then I said, good Peter, say it fast. Boy, he knew every sound, but he could not blend them, okay? Because it was missing, that was missing something that he needed. So anyway, we're going to talk about the model that a number of you are using, that we use in our literacy clinic on our campus. First of all, for reading, we do repeated oral assisted reading. Repeated oral-assisted reading is not unique to i.t.a, but you will find that using the i.t.a materials for kids who read, and adults, excuse me, I should not keep saying kids. For people who are reading below 3rd grade level, the i.t.a materials will help them to get to grade level much faster. Writing, we're going to be using i.t.a to help kids make that match between the sounds and the symbols and being able to blend them. That's what Peter couldn't do. He could make the match, but he couldn't blend. And then we are going to be doing that in conjunction with creative writing. The kids always write stories as they're learning how to match the sounds to the symbols. And then what I call orthographic awareness, which is the spelling by pattern, the spelling patterns in traditional orthography. That's the essence of this. I heard a lot of you say learning new strategies. There's really some basic strategies. So perhaps more than learning new strategies, it's learning to use them more effectively and consistently, and having faith that they will work. Sometimes we quit using something because it doesn't seem like it's working. Well, I can tell you from well over 20 years what will work and how long pretty much it's going to take for it to work. So the worst thing you could do is stop and say, oh, that didn't work, I'll try something else. You have in the front of your binder an i.t.a chart, okay? Your i.t.a chart may not look exactly like the one that's on this PowerPoint. In fact, there's 2 different ones, okay? The students who are working with i.t.a always have this in front of them. That we never ask them to actually memorize the different symbols. So you have one in there, but let's, as you can see here, this is the one we use for younger kids. There are, all of the consonants are the same. So that's for monster, for snake, for telephone, etc. Okay? So the consonants are the same. Notice with the vowels. The vowels in i.t.a, a student would never mix up a or a because it looks very different. You can see that the a is like an a-e put together, okay? They will never mix up a for octopus and o for ocean liner because, again, they look very different. I, insect, and I, ice cream. Or umbrella, and U, uniform. Okay, and elephant, and E, eagle. So those are the long and the short vowels. The other different vowels, we sometimes call them variant vowels. That's for Amish. I was trying to find something that could be pictured and started with the letter A for ah. In this part of the country, that's easy to teach kids because we do have Amish. I'm sure in many parts of the country you don't have the Amish settlement. So the only other thing I found that can be pictured, and Tahabo gave me one, avocado, so you could use that, or aqua. Nan is wearing aqua today, so you could put a blob of aqua on your chart because I wanted something that could be pictured and started with this sound. And then we have auto. A lot of people who have reading disabilities don't really hear the difference between a and in the beginning, so we'll talk about how you work on that. We have book, and boot, and oi, as in boy, and ow, owl. Those are the vowels. In English, we actually have 19 different vowel sounds. Does that tell you part of why English is so difficult to learn? Because there's so many different ways to spell our vowels. We have what are called digraphs, and that's 2 letters put together. When I was a first grade teacher, it was really interesting to me to hear kids go, they'd learn s, they'd learn h, and then they'd get to something like shoe, and they go s. It wasn't long before they knew that that sh put together was sh, okay? But in i.t.a, there's never that confusion because it's put together from the beginning. We have both thumb, which is voiceless, and feather, which is voiced for the th. Whistle I don't think anybody anymore says whistle. It's supposed to be voiceless, but everybody does say whistle, which is the w. And then we have ch for chair. So you can see that both for beginning writers and for those who have not been able to crack the code of English in reading, which is the most prominent kind of reading disability we have, this simplifies it so that it can be written phonetically. Now, in case you're starting, for those of you who are new to i.t.a. are starting to wonder how do they ever transfer and forget this alphabet and the other, I'm going to demonstrate that all of you have a form of i.t.a. in your lexicon. But hold your skepticism for right now, okay? We also have some special symbols. The is different from the r as in rabbit because this is used when there's a vowel ahead of it, but you don't hear it. So for example, faster, you would use this One of my remediation specialists years ago called this the girlfriend The girlfriend is holding hands with her boyfriend, but the girlfriend talks, okay? Then we have j as in television, and ring. You can ignore the k. I'm going to be taking that off because it's up above as king, I believe. And then there is the soft s, z, that comes at the end of words, as in dogs, as opposed to cats. So those are the symbols that are used in i.t.a. The initial teaching alphabet was originally developed by the, was it the nephew of the Greg shorthand creator, Sir James Pittman? Yeah, in England, to begin to teach kids how to read. Okay, it's a simplified phonetic alphabet. Some of you might be familiar with the International Phonetic Alphabet, which is every sound in English or in any language can be represented in this. It's more complex than this one. Okay, so this is an initial teaching alphabet to help kids get started with reading in that crucial first stage where they have to be able to, what I keep saying, crack the sound code of English. So those are the, this is what our i.t.a. chart looks like that we use in the clinic. And the reason that it has the different colors associated with different sets of symbols is because when a kid is looking for 44 different sounds, if you're using an alphabet chart around the room, that takes forever. So I classified them and put them into bands. So if a student is looking for ah, as in Amish, I would say look in the green. Or if they're looking for ah, or if they're looking for rah, as in robber, I would say look in the yellow. Okay. So that's what our, and by the way, we have a tutor kit over here so that you see what our tutors pick up when they meet their student and go in some part of the library to provide the one-on-one that they get. There's a tutor kit there, and then there's a couple of the kids' folders. There's also all the i.t.a. reading books. I'll be talking about those later. And then in that one blue basket, there's some TO books, traditional orthography. Once our kids are no longer need i.t.a., they move right into whatever reading level they should be at, which might be third, it might be fourth. These are all fourth grade level books, and the tutor can just pick any one and go through with them using ROAR. This is what one of our little guys wrote some time ago as he was learning i.t.a., and he liked going with his dad on the milk truck. So he says, I think we can all read that, can't you? Can you see here up well enough to read? Let me hear you read it.
My dad and I wake up early in the morning to go to work. We go on the farms to get the milk. I try to catch chicken. I dive in the evening. I get cows that I'm not afraid. I go in the creamery to tell my dad what he's struck. When he tells out our coffee, it gets warm. We go to this place where I take trees and hop.
Isn't that a wonderful little story? He was a first grader who was absolutely struggling with learning how to read. He was reading like pre-primer level. And by the time he was in i.t.a., just for a few months, he was producing stories like this and reading them. It's a great way to enter into i.t.a. And in fact, what I've heard from our graduates of i.t.a. who go on to high school is what great writers they are. So they learn to crack the sound code for writing and reading and develop good writing at the same time. Here's another one. Can we read it together?
Inside the cave it was really dark, and there were many bats with glowing yellow eyes. All of a sudden, they heard a rumbling roar, and the ground in the cave started to shake. There was a scream of silence, and they all saw big red eyes.
Isn't that great phrase, stroke of silence? It's just a phenomenal. Again, a second grader who could hardly read with accuracy even at mid-first grade level, but was able to express his ability to write creatively using i.t.a. This particular next one is from a high school student. I'm looking at Shelly because it's a young woman who was in her school. She was about 16 when she wrote this, could hardly read, maybe second grade level when she started in the i.t.a. program. And this is such a powerful poem. I'll read it to you because it's a little longer. The baby cried all that day. The pain and hunger would not go away. The father gone and not coming back. Mother and son live in a shack. No job, no money, or love to share, asking on the streets for money to spare. She does drugs, with the money buys cocaine. Her whole wide world is a puddle of shame. She just left him there in the park, leaving his world surrounded by dark. No sorrow or guilt at all that day, just turning her head and walking away. As he grew older and knew she was gone, he knew it was not he who went wrong. His new family washed away his pain. He no longer had to live with the blame of his mother who decided to give him away, the mother who left him in the park that day. Even after years of reading this poem, I still get goosebumps when I think about how this is a poetic voice that would have been silenced without i.t.a., because she certainly could not produce anything like this in Teal. And you notice it's a simple rhyme scheme, it's simple words, but the power to evoke emotions is fantastic. She did some other really cool writings too.